Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut. Rodney King, they don't know shit about Rodney King. And you were there for the litigation. What was the environment like at that time?
It was ugly because it was the first case that really caught media attention for a use of force. And, it was poorly filmed, but it was filmed. It was ugly. I mean, it was a very ineffective arrest. And it's interesting because if you watch the Rodney King video, and I watched it a lot, especially working on the case, initially they're trying to subdue Rodney. It's very clear at some point it transitions to trying to educate Rodney.
Yeah.
Which obviously constitutionally is very problematic, right? It's not law enforcement's role to punish. It's law enforcement's role to enforce the law and arrest, and it's the judiciary's job to punish.
All right, welcome back. Two Cops, One Donut. I'm your host, Eric Levine, and today I have with me the tactical guru, Jon Becker. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, buddy. How you doing?
Living the dream, bro. Living the dream. I actually mean it when I say that, too, because I'm doing podcasting, which is fun as hell for me because I learn a lot, and I still get to be a cop in a city that supports us, so.
Highly unusual place these days.
Right, highly unusual for us. But if you're just tuning into this and you kind of wonder where the structure of this podcast is going to go, Jon and I, because he is the tactical expert that he is, and we're going to talk about tactics and armor and things of that nature as far as military and police go. And you're like, Eric, I thought your podcast was about bridging gaps between the community and first responders. It is, but it's also education. So if people can understand why we wear some of the, air quotes, scary things that we wear, I think Jon's going to be able to show a little insight of why we wear what we wear and what we choose, and why sometimes function is better than what scary things look like. We have to balance that as police officers, but not so much as military. Military is lucky they get to wear all the cool shit and not worry about what they look like. So let's jump into it. Jon, first and foremost, brother, where are you at right now?
Just outside of LA. We're about 35 miles northeast of LA in California.
Oh, you're a brave man for saying that out loud on
Born and raised, buddy.
Born and raised. Yeah, we have signs up out here that say, "Don't California my Texas."
Which I think is a really reasonable position.
And then when
we do have a tendency to move into other people's states and wreck them. So,
and then when you go over to Florida, they got signs that say, "Don't New York my Florida." So apparently that's where the big migrations are coming from.
Yeah, my first indication that California was different than other states was when Californians started moving to Washington State. And there was an ad that Rainier Beer did that showed a guy with zinc on his nose and surf shorts and long blonde hair. And it just said, "Take the beer and go home."
Yeah, they do have some damn good beers out there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we have that nobody else has is fantastic weather. So, I look at it as a weather tax, but definitely not of the political majority of my state.
Well, this is going to be my first trip to California. I'm going to San Diego for the IACP this year. So
yeah, San Diego's beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I watched Ron Burgundy talk about it on Anchorman. So my understanding is San Diego is Native American for whale's vagina. According to the movie.
That actually is not correct.
Yeah. Oh, that's not.
Yeah, he was wrong even there. Yeah.
Love it. Well, brother. Okay, so you're born and raised in Cali. And the line of work that you're in is kind of the opposite of California. So kind of give us a rundown of your upbringing. What led you to this path?
Yeah. So I grew up, in Southern California, law enforcement and military family. Dad was Navy captain, brother special operator and a cop. Grew up around the industry, but not directly in it. At 17, left high school early, went to college, and sat next to a girl that sold rock climbing equipment for a living, and used to go climbing with them on the weekends. And she said, "Hey, we should start a business and sell this stuff, mail order." I said, "Okay, yeah, sure. That sounds like fun." She flaked right away because she had a job and was going to college. And I started dealing with spec ops units and SWAT teams who were buying ropes and carabiners and harnesses and eights and that kind of stuff from me.
Oh, okay.
And that
Makes
was
sense.
that was the first pull, and I was comfortable around that. Growing up in a law enforcement military family, I was comfortable around that population, and so I started researching the gear because I didn't want to be a sales guy. I didn't want to be kind of the used car sales guy selling stuff. And I quickly figured out the climbing industry, the more advanced people become as climbers, the less gear they buy. It's not a population that is really, it's not a great business model. And I started dealing with more and more tactical teams. And so I would really research the stuff I was selling them and be able to give them, a good opinion on what stuff does, what it doesn't do, helping them to differentiate between products. And that led to teams coming back to me and saying, "Hey, can you get us, can you get us Eagle nylon gear?" So I don't know anything about that. Oh, call John Carver and get set up, and we'll buy our Eagle from you. And that turned into, can you get us chemical agents? And so my rule was I would
It's a
never
good
turn
jump.
down. Yeah, exactly. My rule was I would never turn down free training. And I was lucky enough that the guys that I met early on took me under their wing and spent a lot of time making me smart so that I would do a better job of serving them. But in the process, they made me better at my job across the board. And it just happened to be that the guys that took me under their wing were really the founders of SWAT in the United States. So
Oh,
it was Ron McCarthy and Sid Hale and Mike Hillman and John Coleman and the guys that founded the NTOA, the guys that founded Cato, Sandy Wall as a reference for Texas. I was very lucky that these guys took the time to make me smart, even though I was a civilian and was never going to be on the job. Never had interest in being on the job. I loved my relationship with my teams, and then finished college, went to law school. 2 years in law school, I worked LAPD police litigation. So I worked on the Rodney King case. I worked on the Reginald Denny case. I worked on a
what?
bunch of SIS and dog bite cases.
Oh my God.
And it's kind of like, honestly, the joke is that I'm tactical Forrest Gump. I have ended up in the right place with the right people, and the business started to grow, and I got out of law school and was kind of at that point where I'm either going to continue to do the business or practice law. I passed the bar and get my license, and then I quickly realized that law enforcement litigation is insurance, outside of a privately insured context. It's like the city of Los Angeles is self-insured. We fought everything that we thought we were correct on. Outside of that, when private litigation occurs, it's an insurance company that makes a decision. And that was not something that I really wanted to do because I'm a believer in law enforcement. And when somebody does the right thing, I really wanted to defend them. And you could see very easily how these cases were getting settled, and dirtbags that were shooting cops were getting, $1 million to make the lawsuit go away. And so we started doing military stuff, and the business grew. And so I made the decision to maintain my license, but run Aardvark. And now 30 some odd years later, it's been almost 4 decades I've been doing this because I'm 55 now. It was the right decision. I've had an amazingly blessed career, and have worked with some of the top units in the world, and now have an opportunity to give back both through my job and through the podcast. So it's fantastic.
Okay, so you opened up a rabbit hole with saying that you were there for the litigation of Rodney King. So these younger officers out there, I've asked cops, new cops, discussing body cameras and in car cameras and stuff like that. And I'll ask them, I'm like, well, you know what started this all, right? And they're like, no, what? And I'm like, they think Michael Brown, which
Yeah,
which is actually true for body cameras, but
sure.
they were a thing, but they weren't a thing, and then they were mandated, which I think was a great thing. But uh, Rodney King, they don't know shit about Rodney King, and you were there for the litigation. What was the environment like at that time?
It was ugly because it was the first case that really caught media attention for a use of force. And it was poorly filmed, but it was filmed. It was ugly. I mean, it was a very ineffective arrest. Um, and it's interesting because if you watch the Rodney King video, and I watched it a lot, especially working on the case, initially they're trying to subdue Rodney. It's very clear at some point it transitions to trying to educate Rodney.
Yeah.
Which obviously constitutionally is very problematic, right? It's not law enforcement's role to punish. It's law enforcement's role to enforce the law and arrest, and it's the judiciary's job to punish. And so you watch that video, and there's a lot of things now looking at it with a more modern eye that you would see that weren't really seen at the time. But it's an ugly video. Fortunately, Rodney was not that badly injured. I mean, that could have very easily ended in him dying. But retrospectively, that was one of those moments for law enforcement where the future of law enforcement took an inflection.
Yes.
And it changed the way, and the thing is,
Yeah.
law enforcement, the evolution of law enforcement, at least during my career, there's a gradual progressive building of kind of social conscience and social thought, but there is a catalytic event that changes the public's perception of whether it be a tactic or equipment, and it can be both positive and negative, right? Like the North Hollywood bank robbery was a positive thing for law enforcement because people all of a sudden realized like cops were significantly outgunned.
Yeah.
And it gave kind of this social space for patrol rifles and for more advanced tactics and starting to look at active shooter and those kinds of things, which might not have been well received prior to that. But Rodney King was one of those moments where the credibility of law enforcement really came into question, and the application of force and the constitutionality of the application of force came into question. And I think that if 100 years from now, we look back and you go, okay, what was that moment? Rodney King was that moment where the public began to go, hey, wait a minute, like this is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was out of sight, out of mind before the cultural policing. There were, the even bad guys had the mindset, like if I run from the cops, there's an ass whooping attached to it.
Oh yeah.
Back in that day, it's not like that now. But like you say, it's kind of like the rise of the phoenix out of the ashes kind of thing. It was a tragedy. Like that shouldn't have happened. But at the time, if you were to talk to the police or talk to the public at the time, for the most part, if they just would have heard about that, they'd have been like, that, then he shouldn't have, bad guys shouldn't be doing bad guy things.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you see it, that's a different story. And that's what started bringing the cameras around and getting into tactics and stuff like that. How police use force changed. And I think, like you said, it's this little slow snowball effect. Something bad happens, the public tells us what's going to be dictated from here on out, and we figure something out for them and go, is this good? And they're like, yep, we like that. That's good. Until you get down a few years later, now all these police cars have cameras in the cars, but why don't the cops have something on them? Look, it could have prevented the Michael Brown thing, which was a bullshit lie. And that was found out by the DOJ and all this stuff. But even though it was a lie and it ruined that one cop's career, I can't help but kind of be thankful that we kind of went through all that, because I depend on that body camera now. I feel naked without it. I don't like not having it. It's saved my ass more times than I can count. I've had a few fake complaints come in, and they watch the body cam footage and they're like, "Oh, would you like to be charged with falsifying, a report?" And it's really worked out. So I like the way you put it. I like the way you put it. That even though we've had these bad things happen, we, in policing anyway, we keep learning from it and having this good inflection and changing the way that we do things. Tactics, the robbery that you're referring to, was that L.A. that happened in?
North Hollywood.
North Hollywood. Okay.
North Hollywood, California.
Yeah. Man, I every patrol car I know has a rifle and a shotgun.
Yeah.
And our department, specifically, the officers have the option. Like, you don't have to go to a armory or anything like that and check a weapon out for the day. Like, you have your own. You can either have a city issued one that's yours, or you can go buy your own and have a nicer weapon, as long as you qualify with it. And the range guys know how to fix it if something breaks. So,
Yeah, it's funny. North Hollywood was one of those. Like as I work with the California Association of Tactical Officers for a program called the Strategic Leadership Program, and it's a mentorship program for about 10 handpicked tactical leaders. And one of the things that we do with that program is we go through the history of special tactics and we look at
oh,
historical events, starting at Texas Tower and working all the way forward.
okay.
And there are those catalytic turning points. And North Hollywood was one of those, not only because, it was the first time that thing played out on a live TV. Like I remember
Yeah.
watching that evolving on live TV. The guys were well armored. They had armor wrapped around their legs, their torsos, their arms. I mean, they were basically like the Michelin Man. And the radio traffic, I attended a debrief after the event, and the radio traffic is horrifying. I mean, it is most cops have a nightmare of being in a shooting and their bullets not working. And it literally goes out over the radio. Our bullets are having no effect.
It's working. Like
Yeah, it's like your
the
nightmare's
dream
playing
has
out.
come true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Fuck.
Yeah,
Oh,
welcome to your nightmare. And the LAPD officers were going to a local gun store, B&B, and borrowing M4s. Ultimately, what ended one of the guys kills himself. The other one, a few guys from LAPD D platoon heard the thing evolving, were literally picked up in running shorts. If you watch it, you'll see one of the guys is in running shorts and attack vest, Donnie Anderson, and they came and engaged the guy, and it all played out on national television. And I think it was a moment where everybody went, "Oh my God, yeah, they need more than a handgun, and we need the ability to respond to these kind of events." And Columbine had the same type of an effect, right? There have been these
yeah. Yeah.
events,
No
some
longer
positive,
set
some
up a
negative.
perimeter and wait and get all of everything go. The active shooter, you get your ass in there. Um, so from a armor perspective, to help people that maybe aren't familiar, most pistols for a police officer are either going to be a 9 millimeter, a 40, or a 45. Um, and the armor that these guys were wearing is capable of stopping all that, which is typically, from my understanding, level 3 armor, your soft body armor.
No, actually, you can stop those rounds with a 2A armor. So the way to think of it is 2A, 2, 3A is kind of that's soft armor.
Was 2A out then?
Oh yeah, yeah. Two
Oh
A,
shit.
2A. So that was the original armor. Was most agencies wore 2A, and it's kind of the NIJ is going to reset the standard here at some point, and they need to because it's gotten very confusing. But it was 2A was below 2, and then 3A is below 3. So it's somewhat confusing. But the way to think of armor is split it into hard armor and soft armor,
Okay.
which is splitting it handgun rifle.
Correct.
Okay. So from a handgun standpoint, yeah, they were wearing, I think they had level 2 armor. They'd bought a bunch of vests and turned them into pants and shirts. And, I mean, you see the suits that they wore, and they're on display at the LAPD museum, but you see the suits that they wore, and they were literally wrapped up like the Michelin Man, just had armor wrapped around them,
Yeah.
which worked really well. They took, I don't know how many
God,
hundreds of rounds.
I was gonna say I give them credit as far as just standing through it, because I've seen armor get shot, and I've seen videos of other. I'm not getting shot, but I've seen other officers take a round into their armor, and that is devastating to the body alone. It's gonna hurt.
I think it depends on where it hits.
You
So
think so?
yeah, no, for sure. Like the blunt trauma that's associated with soft armor, a lot of it depends on where the round hits, and is it right over bone? Is like if you get hit on the rib cage where the skin is very thin, you're going to see a more profound effect on the skin than if you get hit, in the love handle,
Right.
and or in the pectoral muscle. There's always a certain amount of damage that's inflicted by soft armor, usually a burn from the velocity being absorbed by the package and the package moving into the skin. But
Oh, the actual skin gets burned from
yeah,
that?
the skin, the surface of the skin gets burned by the back side of the package in a lot of cases, and you'll have a certain amount of trauma. It could be a big bruise, could be a tear in the skin. In fact, every once in a while you'll get one. I had an agency approach me with a package of another armor company, and they said this vest failed, and our officer, as a result, was really badly hurt. And said, okay, well, let me see. And they brought up the pictures, and I looked at the pictures, and I said, okay. And they said, well, it went through the vest. And I said, well, where'd the bullet go? And they said, well, we don't know. I said, well, they think it came back out. So no, it doesn't go in the hole and come back out the hole. That's not the
Yeah,
way
physics
ballistics
don't
work.
work that way.
And so I said, let me see I looked at the pictures of the armor and I said, have you guys cut the vest open to find it? They said no. And so they went to Sheriff's Department cut it open. They found the bullet. So yeah, it looks to me, like looking at it initially, it looks to me like you're probably going to owe this armor company an apology, because I think they saved your guy's life. And it's not an armor company I like. Let's start there. It is by far one of my least favorite armor companies.
Okay.
And not one that I see as, consistently acting ethically. But there was a pretty substantial wound on the back of the vest and on the skin, and no hole, just kind of a wound. And they didn't understand that actually the bullet had stopped.
Hey, y'all, Eric Levine, 2 Cops, 1 Donut. I got to tell you about my new sponsor, Peregrine. Yeah, like the Falcon. Peregrine is an advanced data analytics platform for public safety. Peregrine builds technology that transforms the way people and entire organizations interact with their data for decision-making and operations. The platform empowers department personnel to create and implement effective strategies, make informed decisions in critical moments, and protect their communities. Peregrine revolutionizes data integration by transforming, cleaning, and extracting meaningful connections between data from dozens of previously siloed systems. Its user-friendly tools, applications, and data visualizations enable personnel, from chiefs to investigators to analysts and patrol officers, to access crucial information and insights in the format, timeframe, on the device, including mobile, that they require. Additionally, Peregrine delivers real-time, tailored insights and context to staff both in headquarters and in the field, allowing law enforcement officers to proactively address emerging situations, stay ahead of potential threats, and make better long-term operational decisions that impact both officers and the communities they serve. Discover more at peregrine.io. That's PEREGRINE.io. And make sure you tell them 2 Cops, 1 Donut sent you.
And that the little, tear in his skin was not a bullet hole. Since they didn't find a bullet in him, it didn't go through him. It's like, guys, look at the vest. And then they did, and subsequently apologized to the company. But so to go back, think of it as handgun, rifle, stopping handgun. And there are some wobblers, but let's just keep it simple.
Okay.
The majority of agencies now are either in level 2 or 3A. The differentiating round between those two being the 44 Magnum round.
Okay.
And most of the time with ballistics, stopping the bullet is not the hard part. It's stopping the bullet without too much backface. So usually what will separate a level 2 package from a level 3A package is not its ability to stop a 44 Magnum round. It's being able to stop it within the 44 millimeters of backface that the NIJ requires.
What is backface?
So think of the way that backface is tested is they take a mannequin with Roma plastilina clay, like modeling clay,
Mm-hmm.
that you would play with when you were a kid, at a particular temperature and a particular density, and they put the armor over the front of it, and then they shoot the armor, and you would imagine there's a dent that's left behind. That's called a backface signature. And that backface signature is theoretically the dent that would have made in your body. It's not totally representative, but at some point you just have to draw a standard.
Yeah.
Right. Think of it like a qualifying standard. Like, it's completely random.
Yep.
20 rounds at this distance. Like, we're just making up a standard to demonstrate proficiency. And that's kind of what NIJ does. It's grounded in science. It's grounded in as much reality as they can ground it in. But at some point, you have to have a driver's test that just says, if you do these things, then you get a driver's license. And if you don't, then you don't. And that's kind of how the NIJ standard works. And the reason that they require backface testing initially was concerns about backface killing somebody. Somebody being hit. There's a lot of data of little kids getting hit in the chest with baseballs and softballs.
Stopping their heart.
And stopping their heart.
Yeah.
And so that was the concern, was we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why you had trauma plates.
Yep.
And that has not panned out. I am not aware of a single death caused by backface deformation.
Hmm.
So you can say, well, backface doesn't matter. And I would say, no, actually, backface does matter. But the way that the NIJ defined the standard means that backface isn't a threat. Right.
Okay.
So you say, oh, nobody's died in a car crash in the last the last 5 years. Well, everybody's wearing seatbelts and has airbags. Doesn't mean car crashes are safer. It means we've made the car safer.
Correct.
And in this case, you've made armor safe enough that you've taken backface out of the equation.
Okay.
So that's what a backface signature is.
Gotcha. And as far as round capabilities. So this is one thing I've had to educate people on a lot is a 9mm round. Okay, people think that that's the baby round. I'm a 9mm fan. That's my favorite round. That will tear through a car. That will tear through your body very easily. And people think that car doors and all this stuff can stop those type of pistol rounds. Basically, if a car door is not going to do it, a rifle, as you said, you got soft armor and hard armor. Hard armor is for rifle rounds. Now just imagine the capabilities of a rifle round. So can you go into the dynamics of armor and rifle rounds?
Sure. So in order to stop a bullet's got a certain amount of kinetic energy, right? It weighs X and it's moving at Y velocity, right? It's a 158 grain boat tail hollow point bullet going at 3,000 feet a second, has this many joules of energy. And that in order for the bullet to stop, you have to dissipate that energy before it reaches the tensile strength of the material it's hitting. Right? So if I throw a rock at a window, the window breaks because the event is too short for the glass to absorb the energy of the rock. If you think of it in terms of catching the bullet, and we'll use that just as a surrogate. It's not totally accurate, but for right now, we'll use it as a surrogate. You know, we've all been thrown a baseball hard with a bare hand.
Right.
Right? Sometimes it bounces off your hand. Sometimes it hurts like hell. But in order to catch it, you've got to stop it. That's true with ballistics. So the goal with armor is to catch or dissipate the energy of a round. With a handgun round, generally speaking, the way you're doing that is by catching it. So you are creating an event that is long enough with a material that is strong enough to dispose of all that energy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, the way to think of it is if you throw an egg at a wall, it breaks. If you throw an egg at a bed sheet and you hold it loosely, you'll catch the egg.
Right.
The same is true here. We're trying to catch the bullet. So with soft ballistics, the goal is to entangle and catch the bullet and dump the energy it has. The challenge with a rifle round is like if you think of a handgun round as, let's just say, roughly 1,100, 1,200 feet a second and a relatively heavy projectile, 145 grains, 147 grains, 127 grains. So you have a heavier object that's moving slower. With a rifle, you have a very light object, 68 grains, 58 grains, moving 2,300, 2,400, 3,000 feet a second. So now it's a light object that is moving extremely fast. And when it impacts, the event is very short. It's a third the time that you would have with a handgun round. It's a smaller diameter object, which means it's more likely to penetrate. And so you're having to catch that round in a different way. So the way most rifle plates work is you're using a harder object. You're no longer trying to catch the bullet by absorbing the energy. You're trying to trap the bullet and dump the energy quickly, or you're trying to force the energy back into the bullet. So if you think of a bullet hitting a piece of steel, right? The steel's unimpressed. All the energy from the bullet goes into rebound and goes into shattering the bullet itself. In the case of ceramic, you're shattering the ceramic. But you have to dump that energy in the time you have before that thing penetrates the material. And so what makes rifles hard to stop is they're small, they're fast, and they're very light.
Compared to the pistol round, which is not traveling near as quick.
Exactly. Okay. And so that's why you go to harder materials. You start getting into, unidirectional polyethylenes, or you get into ceramic, or you get into steel, although I'm not a fan of steel. I like it on a Bearcat. I don't like it on a person.
Why not?
Steel is prone to splattering.
The Spalding?
No, not spalling.
Is that
spalling is when a round hits an object and the energy is carried through the object to the other side. So for instance, if you hit a rifle round into a brick wall, it will break a chunk of brick off the other side of the wall. That's spalling.
Oh, okay.
Splatter is think of like when you shoot steel targets.
Mm-hmm.
If you go look at the steel targets, you'll see that the round kind of exploded and makes like a starburst. All of that is the metal from the bullet splattering out. If you think about a steel plate being on your chest, where does that splatter go?
To your throat.
To your throat.
Yeah.
So it's I've never been a fan of steel plates. Ceramic, yes. Polyethylene, yes. And then like to clarify even more, within rifles, the line for rifles is the M855 round,
That's the green tip.
the green tip.
Yep.
So mild steel core 7.62 39 AK rounds, typical 5.56 223 rounds, M193 stuff that you're going to run into, normal 223 rounds. Actually, relatively easy to stop with polyethylene, with like Spectra is a material that people are familiar with.
Okay.
So the line is the 855 round. That's the first significant change in ballistics. To stop the 855 round, you have to have ceramic.
Oh,
So that's where ceramic plates kick in.
gotcha. I
Okay.
hated wearing ceramic plates in the military. They're so big.
Yes, but your threat in the military was an 855 round.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so you need it, right?
Yeah. No, I understand. The necessary evil. I just, at the time, I think things have gotten significantly lighter and smaller.
But
Since
it's still almost double.
is
The
it?
weight is still almost double. Yeah, I mean it's a really light plate now. Is around and a polyethylene plate is around 2 pounds, and you're going to go up to almost 3.5 to stop an 855 round.
Okay. Well, shit. The ones that I was issued were like 10 pounds a piece.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's a bargain for me. I would rather go down to 4 pounds than deal with the 10-pound plates that we had. Matter of fact, they're probably up in the attic weighing something down right now. But
Well, that
yeah.
was also they also may have been trying to stop AP rounds, right? So then the next line, if you think of rifle ballistics as 3 buckets, you've got what was originally called level 3, and hopefully eventually here with the new NIJ standard is going to be called RF1, and that is all the AK rounds and typical 5.56 rounds.
Okay.
Bucket number 2 is 855.
Your armor piercing.
No,
No?
an 855 is not an AP round, although it is very good at penetrating armor. It's not designed to be an armor penetrator.
I thought it was.
Yeah, so it's kind of in between.
Okay.
So think of that as kind of that second bucket. That third bucket, and in that second bucket, you'll have a lot of bigger rifle calibers. In the third bucket is the M2 AP round, which is
Okay.
a specific round designed to be armor penetrating. And in the current NIJ, that's a level 4,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
So the problem with NIJ was you have level 3 and level 4. So you had 2 giant buckets. And then along comes the 855 round.
Screwed up their measurements.
Right. And you can stop it with a little bit of ceramic. It doesn't have to be as heavy as level 4, but you ended up in this kind of weird place. And this is part of the problem with the NIJ standard all along is they have to pick a reference round.
Right.
Right? Like in the end, you have to pick a standard. And what they picked when they originally did it was a 308 round and an AP round. Neither of which, you don't see an M80 round anymore, and you don't see an M2 AP round anymore. So now what we're hoping they're going to do and what the proposed standard is to actually split that into those 3 buckets as RF1, RF2, RF3.
Okay. Yeah.
But for most cops, it's a question of, do you want to stop the 855 round?
Yeah. And I can tell you day-to-day patrol, it's not something, I mean, I would love to stop it, but I can't. If I want a long-lasting career, I can't be wearing that much gear all the time.
I think it depends. Armor in general depends on your mission set.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so your armor has to fit your mission set. If you tell me, hey, I'm a school resource officer, you have one mission set. If you say, hey, I am on the FBI hostage rescue team, you have a different mission set.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you tell me, hey, I'm an SRT team at a military base, well, green tip is a real threat to you.
Yes.
Right. So it's kind of figuring out like, I always tell people like I can make you completely safe. You just won't be able to move. right? Like
Right,
I
yeah.
can turn you into
Yeah.
a human tank. You just
Yeah.
won't be able to move or shoot.
You look
Or
like
I can put you in a tactical sports bra
yeah.
and you can be killed by a 22 round. And so it's like each person has to look at what is their mission threat. You know, what is their first? What's the threat posed by your mission set, and then what do you run into?
Yeah.
Right? We always tell you should be able to stop your duty round. You should be able to stop your neighboring agency's duty rounds
Yeah.
for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
because blue on blue is usually agency on agency.
Yep.
And then what are you pulling off the street? And then if you're in a place that there are a lot of kind of let's call them white trash areas of California where everybody has green tip, and they have green tip because they know it goes through cops armor.
Damn.
That's a different threat,
That is.
right? So it's kind of look at that and then realize that you trade mobility and comfort for protection, but make a conscious choice. And it doesn't mean that armor can't be scalable. So if you're working patrol, you're in soft armor all the time and you're not wearing a rifle plate because it's not likely you're going to run into a rifle threat in a patrol environment. Where you will is an active shooter, bank robbery. You then need the ability to up armor.
Yes.
Hence active shooter racks, plate racks, that give you the ability to quickly put on plates. Because,
Yes.
you look at was it Louisville that just had the bank robbery? I mean, that's a very real threat that develops very quickly.
Yeah. That vest that you can kind of see on the ground behind me, that's got the reason I like that outer carrier is I have the ability when I'm taking it on and off, I can slip a plate in there.
Yep.
It's got a space to put one in the back, but what a lot of people don't tend to think about is unless you have a partner, you ain't getting a plate in there while you're responding to a call.
No.
So you're going to get one in the front. You're definitely not going to get one in the back unless you got more time.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of separate plate racks, for a couple reasons. One, it gives you the ability to quickly up armor, like in seconds you can up armor, but it also gives you the ability to increase your mission capability.
Yeah.
Right? Because like working patrol, you don't need to carry M4 mags.
Right.
Going into an active shooter, you need M4 mags.
Yeah.
You need an enhanced, like you may carry a small IFAC in patrol, but if you're going into an active shooter situation, you need an enhanced IFAC, right? You need multiple tourniquets. So what we encourage most of our agencies to do is view it as two separate problems. What are we going to armor our patrol officers with? And then what are we going to give them in secondary capability in the form of, a long gun, additional magazines, medical kits. We have agencies that are carrying medical backpacks.
Yep.
Into active shooters.
Yep.
We
have
saw
a TAC med team.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, and I tell you something, TAC meds, the evolution of TCCC has saved more cops' lives and more civilians' lives. I mean, people don't realize how often cops are saving. I mean, set aside Narcan, which we can debate the morality of saving people at overdose, but set that aside and how many people are saved by cops every day with Narcan.
Yeah.
The number of people in active shooter situations that are saved by patrol officers that have received TCCC training, by tactical medics, it is amazing how many people are surviving situations. At the IRC terrorist incident in San Bernardino, there are dozens of people who are saved by a TAC medic by simply saying, open their airway, get them on their side, do this, put this tourniquet here. And so it is a ridiculously valuable thing for the community. And that's exactly where, having secondary capabilities for active shooter gives a patrol officer who is a medic the ability to quickly throw on a backpack.
Yeah. So part of the problem that I've run into, my department, they gave us level 4 vests to up armor and stuff like that. The problem I have is I wear outer carrier and I wear everything up front. I got my mags, I got my radio, slightly off to the side, all this stuff. The moment I want to go throw this thing on, I've covered up all of my stuff, all my tools. So one of the things that departments don't necessarily have the money for is when they go throw this secondary vest on, I want that thing to be laid out
Yeah,
all
totally.
ready to go. I want,
Yep.
the only thing I should have to do, if anything, is grab my radio mic cord and plug it into a new spot. And that's all I want to have to do.
100%. And
Um,
that's what we encourage agencies to do. Like most agencies that we work with, it's a common thing that's presented to us. Hey, we want to start an active shooter program. We need to scale up. And I tell them, like, look at it as two different things. And yeah, some of your guys are going to carry M4 mags, they're going to carry handgun mags, whatever in patrol. This is a separate capability. So when you field your active shooter kits, field them with additional magazines, field them with medical kits, field them with, with door stops.
yeah.
If your agency is using a clearing system, whether it's paint pens or whatever, like put that stuff into that active shooter capability. And
If you're law enforcement, stop and listen to me right now. If you're a police department that does not have an LPR system, Insight is offering the first 10 agencies, that means one agency apiece, gets one camera for free. You have to tell them that Two Cops, One Donut sent you. You heard me right. If you're a police agency that does not have an LPR system yet, or does have an LPR system, and you're not happy with the product you have, Insight is offering you a free camera. No strings attached, and they will install it. I have 10 to give out. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you, or reach out to me, and I will get you in contact. If you're a business owner or an HOA, please stop and listen to me right now. If you're just listening to the audio, do yourself a favor and watch the YouTube version of this episode to get a visual of what I'm about to tell you. I want to tell you guys about Insight LPR. It's a license plate reader. If your agency, community, or business is looking to invest in LPR to help solve and deter crime or to make your community safer, Insight LPR has my vote of confidence. I've met with their team. They know their LPRs, guys. They're the real deal. They bring over 75 years of collective experience to building LPR cameras and the software that supports communities across the country. The other thing I really like about this team is how much they listen to law enforcement. They understand the importance of working together with law enforcement and getting their input as they build and innovate products and their service to match the needs of law enforcement. In other words, when I complain or have suggestions to make their damn camera better, they actually do it. The Insight LPR team is extremely passionate and takes pride in their product development, which makes their cameras some of the most durable cameras in the market. For the gear nerds out there, what that means is this stuff's made of military grade aluminum and is nitrogen purged, whatever that means. This design makes the cameras rugged and able to withstand harsh weather elements. Here's the big selling point for me. Their nighttime scan accuracy is higher than most of the leading competitors. In my opinion, this is what sets them apart. As we know, the majority of crimes occur at night, so it's critical to have high scan accuracy at night. Insight's cameras check the box with the nighttime plate read accuracy greater than 96%. 96%, guys. That's pretty freaking high. If your community is looking to invest in LPR technology, reach out to one of their experts today, or reach out to me. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you.
push those logistics
So
forward.
before you go too far, let's kind of explain that for people that don't know. So when we're searching during active shooters and we're clearing rooms and stuff, so we can mark where we've already searched for the people coming up behind us, you throw down these markers, whether it's a glow stick or whatever it is, and that's going to signify to the cops that come in behind you or SWAT or whoever it is, all right, this room's been cleared, because an active shooter, you're moving. You're not stopping. And then the door stops are to keep stuff behind you once you've searched closed and stuff to that nature. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. To keep things you want closed, and keep things you want open.
Yes. Because when we come across, sometimes you're searching, you're listening for the shots and trying to go to them, and you got doors that are shut behind you that are locked, and you can't get into them. So having the door stops there, so you don't have to worry about a threat sneaking up behind you after you've passed them, it's a good feature to have. So, but yeah, that has been one of my biggest bitches, gripes, complaints, whatever you want. Because as a cop, I see that we're getting this gear, and I'm like, awesome, this is cool. And then, you put it on. You're not putting it on over your other gear, because they're making sure it fits, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're not really thinking ahead. And then all of a sudden, the moment comes, and you're like, oh shit, I need my gear. And I'm wearing a vest, and I'm like, well, if I take this off, I'm gonna miss a bunch of stuff. So let me throw it on over top of my stuff. And you don't have time to sit there and switch things over. You don't have time to do any of that. So this is things to consider for other officers out there maybe listening. Like, think about it. Like, think about this vest, this extra up armor piece that you have. Have you really thought it through? Because I didn't. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
When I got it, I never thought of it until the moment came. And now, luckily, everything de-escalated. We didn't have to do anything. But I'm standing there just thinking, I'm like, I look stupid, and I have no access to a lot of the things that I need access to.
No, it's an unfortunate thing. We lack expertise to foresight and foreshadow things. And one of the big differences between elite units and non-elite units or patrol units or whatever is the elite units prepare for specific missions and think them through. Part of the challenge for patrol officers is your mission set is literally everything from a cat stuck in a
It's
tree
this wide. Yep.
to an active shooter, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you get to a SWAT team or a narcotics team or a counterterrorism team, like you start to narrow the mission sets, which allows them to get deeper expertise.
That's why they walk around like this.
Yes,
All the time.
because they're walking.
You gotta have
They're
SWAT
walking.
hands.
Yes, 100%. Swatty hands are very important.
That is.
But these things occur very rarely. And because they occur very rarely, we don't think about them and we don't prepare for them. And we also don't learn the lessons of the last one, right? Like when Columbine happened, everybody said that'll never happen again.
Yeah.
And then Uvalde happened and everybody said, oh my God. And
Yeah.
that is with a lot of prep, right? I mean, the state
Yeah.
of Texas is
In
more prepared
Texas.
for active shooter. Yeah, literally the alert center is based in Texas,
Yep.
right? You have one of the strongest tactical associations in the world in Texas with TTPOA. And still, here we are.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is a lack of preparation, and part of it is we are down selecting leaders in law enforcement who have stayed out of trouble and
Yep.
are good managers.
Thank you. Somebody said it.
No, I tell you,
Yeah.
man, I was on a podcast a while back, and I said, part of the problem right now is that we are down selecting golden retrievers and thinking we're getting Belgian Malinois.
Right. Yeah. You. It's weird to say. And this is just my perspective, and almost 18 years of law enforcement, but I want the guy that's been in trouble at work a few times. I want the guy that's had his hand slapped out in the field for trying to do police work, and they grow from it. They know, I don't want the Boy Scout to be my leader necessarily. Or if it's going to be that guy, if he has to be the face of the department, let that dude at least have the wherewithal to put the guys in charge of the units and the training that can get the job done and go say, hey, I understand this is not my skill set. I'm more of the community side, which is great, but I'm going to entrust the people that are good at the other side of the enforcement side to go do that. Because you do need both in police work. Military is a different story, but in police work, yeah.
No, I think that one of the problems we have in law enforcement is that the community views cops as kind of a monolith. Like, I want an officer who's good as a school resource officer and is a very nice person, and he's never rude to people and he's never aggressive until there's an active shooter. And then I want a stone cold warrior.
I want a Navy SEAL.
Yes, I want a Navy SEAL. I want friggin' Chris Kyle to show up immediately and deal with that situation immediately. And we don't understand that golden retrievers are golden retrievers because they're nice and they're friendly and they like everybody.
Right.
And Belgian Malinois are Belgian Malinois because they were purpose built.
Yeah.
And I think that as a society, we need to start deconflicting these things. We're in this big, anti-militarization of law enforcement. Like the state of California, we tend to lead the nation in stupidity. And we've passed laws to outlaw military equipment, or to now AB 481 is requiring police departments to report everything that they have that is quote unquote military equipment. Mind you, everything on that list was developed for law enforcement and the military doesn't use. And I say that as a guy who has spent his entire life working with both law enforcement and the military.
Right.
And selling gear to both. So I know what they both do. I spend a lot of time with both types of units. And it's but it's this perception that like the gear is going to make the tactics.
Yeah.
And that is not true.
So what's been your experience so far selling to both and the type of feedback law enforcement's giving you as far as and I hate that I even have to ask this question about the appearance?
So I think that as a country, we are losing nuance. We're losing detail. right? Our politicians, our media, everybody is pushing us towards black and white, right? It is a 9 or it's a 1, and there's nothing in between. And there is nothing that's a 9 and nothing that's a 1. Everything is in between. Everything is gray. And so we look for the stupid answer. We look for the easy thing, like, oh no, the cops look like soldiers. Cops don't look like soldiers. I mean, there are parts of the country where, yeah, cops look like soldiers, but for the most part, cops don't look like soldiers. Wearing a helmet doesn't make you a soldier. Wearing body armor doesn't make you a soldier. Driving a Bearcat, which was built for law enforcement and was in use before DOD up armored all the Humvees, is not military equipment. It's mobile cover,
Right.
right? But because we don't want to take the time to look at the subtlety and look at the complexity, we just go, oh, they look like soldiers.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I mean, I don't know if you've read Radley Balco's book, Rise of the Warrior Cop. If you haven't, as a police officer, you need to.
It sounds from it.
Yeah,
I've read,
every cop in the United States should read that book.
I think I was mandated to read that in
I hope so. Yeah,
either in an academy or in my degrees.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because I set out to read it and I thought this guy's going to be a moron and everything he says is going to be wrong. I actually agree with about 90% of what he says. I disagree on technical grounds with another 5%, and I absolutely vehemently disagree with 5% of what he says. The premise of the book is that we have changed the mindset of law enforcement in the United States, and we have our cops looking at themselves as soldiers, as an occupying army. And he goes through the history of the Fourth Amendment. He goes through the history and evolution of law enforcement, starting with Robert Peel in London through modern times.
That's Sir Robert Peel, sir.
Sir Robert
Get
Peel.
his title right.
Yeah, I refuse to recognize their titles. We have 200 plus years of refusing to recognize their title.
I like it. America.
Yeah. But we are not looking at the real issues here, which is people's complaints are not with the gear, it's with the tactics.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's so they're always trying to change the language, and so now they say cops shouldn't be warriors; they need to be guardians. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm okay with that mindset because you need to have the switch. You need to know when to, what do they say? Be a gardener in a war, and a war in a gardener in a. I don't remember the whole saying. A warrior in a garden. You got to know when to turn it down. And most of the time, 99% of the time for cops, it's just a peacekeeping mission. But if you allow yourself to get too wrapped up to where I'm just a community cop, well, when shit hits the fan, you're not going to be prepared. Your mindset's not even there yet. And your mindset is 90% of the battle, in my opinion. Because
I agree with you.
I sure as shit don't want to look over at my partner who has made it up in their mind that they're this community-oriented cop all the time, and they're surprised when shit hits the fan.
It's interesting. I don't think that the average person, like we are almost a victim of our own success as a country. We are
absolutely
ridiculously safe.
Yeah.
Right? Like you talk to people that work in other parts of the world and you realize like we are ridiculously safe. We're ridiculously comfortable. And as a result, we start to think, well, I mean, things aren't that dangerous. And, I mean, Portland and Seattle and San Francisco being the kind of most 3 favorite whipping boys for the country, definitely for law enforcement. And it's like, they're very comfortable. They're very safe. Like, oh, well, it's too bad that these people are criminals and we should try to do something socially to save them.
Yeah.
And that's because you're sitting at the top of the Maslow triangle.
Yeah.
Right. Maslow hierarchy of needs, you are way up in the self-actualization portion of the program. You're no longer in the I can't eat and I don't feel safe and somebody's trying to kill me stage.
Yeah. You have never had to hunt for food to survive. You've never had to build anything necessarily. Housing's always been provided. There's food readily available everywhere. You do but it's primal. You need to find something to be stressed about to keep your body at peak condition, so to speak. And when you don't have that stress, you're not worried about, a tiger coming out of the bushes or having to get the next meal to survive.
Well, that's why we're all fat and lazy too. I mean, right? There's a kind of causal loop here. I think the problem is that we are so far removed from violence that we forget how violence actually happens. And I'll give you an example. We just had a guy named Jordan Robinson shot in our armor. Jordan's a SWAT cop in San Bernardino, California. And they are taking down a guy who the day before ambushed a deputy sheriff and fired 35 rounds or 33 rounds of an AK-47 into the patrol car. Somehow the cop doesn't get hit.
Damn.
Yeah, it's better to be lucky than good.
Hell yeah, it is.
I mean, he gets damage to his eyes from the glass, and the car catches fire and all that. But so that's who they're going for, right? Like, this guy literally was in a pursuit, pulled over, jumped out, opened fire on the deputy. They find him. A SWAT team goes to take him down with a van, in a vehicle takedown. He jumps out of the car and in 3.5 seconds fires 10 rounds at the team, hits Jordan 8 times, hits Chris Shipley once, and 3.5 seconds after they bump the car. The entire event, from the van bumps him to he's dead in a field, Chris is putting his own tourniquet on Jordan to save Jordan's life, even though Chris is also shot, takes his tourniquet, puts it on Jordan. That's what a hero looks like if you were keeping track at home. But that entire event is 22 seconds.
Damn.
Right? So we have this idea from TV that violence, it develops over time, and the guy pulls a gun out and he points a gun at the cop, and there's a bunch of words exchanged, and then a shot is, and that is not how real violence happens. Real violence happens very quickly. So as a society, we need to accept that law enforcement always have to put themselves at a tactical advantage. I don't care whether you're pulling over grandma or an 8-tray gangster crip. You've got to be in a position that if they do try to do something, you have the ability to flee, the ability to shoot, the ability to do all kinds of things. And I think that law enforcement has done a terrible job of educating the public on what that actually looks like. Right? We see these violent things happen and we hear about them, but we don't actually see them because we censor them. Yeah. We don't want to watch. Nobody wants to watch kids being killed in Uvalde. And certainly the families don't want to watch that. But because we never have to watch it, we're removed from it. And that creates a false perception about what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to do a better job of taking reporters and taking community activists and saying, hey, come down and go through a FAT simulator with us. Come down and do force on force. We're going to come down and have you do let's do patrol stops. And 9 out of 10 times it'll go great. And the 10th time the guy will shoot you when you walk up to the window. Right? That's where we're failing. And because law enforcement has taken a position of being quiet, is the only way I can describe it, right? It's very dangerous for law enforcement to engage the media. It's there's no matter what you say, you could say 99 smart things and one stupid thing, and the one stupid thing will be what the media run with. And so as a result, law enforcement has taken a reactive position and not taken a proactive position with the media. And I think that it's led to the community not really understanding what cops do, not really understanding what tactical situations look like and how they work. And the expense of that is that the community has a misperception. Now, I think if you look at San Francisco and Portland, they're tired of bums sleeping in people's front yards and shooting heroin in their driveways and pooping on their lawns and stealing. And like, you're starting to see people go, oh, maybe this wasn't a good plan. But I think that we need to see a much more proactive approach from law enforcement to battle the misunderstanding. And that was honestly part of the genesis for the podcast, was my frustration with these kinds of situations and how we're not dealing with them head on. And you have an armed adversary in the activist groups who are, right? They're sitting around waiting for you to they're waiting for George Floyd.
Yeah.
And when George Floyd happens, they already have a strategy. They already have litigation that's been prepared. They've already got legislation to propose. And so it happens, and law enforcement gets very quiet about it. And law enforcement doesn't want to attack other law enforcement. And so the perception of the public is that this is how cops are acting. And look, they're not even denying it.
Hey, Eric Levine here from Two Cops, One Donut. Would you like to accelerate your investigations? Would you like 6 months of free access to a solution that will help you solve cases faster? And stop what you're doing and listen to the end of this ad to hear about this free offer exclusively for my members of Two Cops, One Donut. We would tell you right now, but you know those people in marketing would be upset if you didn't hear a pitch. All right, who is Finder Software Solutions? Finder Software Solutions was built on the idea that crime and those committing a crime do not stay within jurisdictional boundaries. Yes, I'm talking to the cops out there, so pay attention. Finder's mission is to assist public safety agencies by developing affordable user-defined software applications that facilitate collaboration between law enforcement personnel to close more cases faster. That's really all you need to pay attention to. Close more cases faster. They've been in the business for nearly 20 years and currently support over 300 agencies sharing billions of records annually. Are you guys still listening? Of course you are, because you guys trust me. So listen to me. If you're interested in accelerating your investigations, then discover Finder for law enforcement, the ultimate solution for agencies revolutionizing information sharing and investigative lead generation. Experience a seamless integration of RMS, CAD, JMS, and numerous digital databases sitting alongside valuable resources like public records, facial recognition, criminal records, LPR data, vehicle information, booking images, and so much more in one easy-to-use investigative platform. Finder allows for efficient data sharing, unveiling investigative leads and criminal patterns, ultimately solving cases faster, enhancing interagency collaboration. Empower your department with comprehensive single-pane information system and redefine the way you solve crime today. All right, guys. Now that we've checked the boxes from the marketing team, back to the free stuff. Finder is giving away 6 or half a dozen, insert your corny donut joke here. Yes, that is 6 free 6-month trials to the first 6 agencies that reach out and say you heard about it on the Two Cops, One Donut podcast. This is a limited time offer and will only be available for first 6 agencies. So contact Finder at findersoftware.com/2cops1donut, all spelled out, or call them at Finder and let them know you heard about it on the podcast. Get signed up with Finder and start closing more cases. It's that easy. Yeah. Now,
And it's a trap.
I will add to that from our side of the house. As an instructor, for 3 years, we would have a new class come in. And within the first week, one of the things we ask them, how many of you have been in a real fight? Not, punching your brother a couple times in the living room, but been in a real fight, the adrenaline, all of that. And I would say probably back in the 90s, you would have got, I would say probably 60% had been in some sort of fight. Fast forward to today when we have trouble recruiting. And the pool we are pulling from is even less removed from violence. And to go along with what you're saying, now you ask, you're lucky if you get 2 people out of a class of 60 people, that's about the size of the classes we had, that had ever been in a real fight.
Yeah.
And then you don't even know if out of those 2 people that raised their hand, if it was a legit fight. Maybe it was a real fight to them, but you never know. So now
then add to that you now can't have them fight in the academy anymore in a lot of places.
Well, not in Texas, sir.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I understand that, but there are other states. I mean,
right?
There are other countries than Texas.
Yeah, there.
But no, I mean, like in other states,
yeah,
you have eliminated fighting in the academy.
Yep.
Because people get hurt and people get their feelings hurt. I mean, there was an academy in the state of California that for a while was giving people yellow cards.
Like soccer?
Yes. So if you felt that you were being bullied or harassed, you could raise a yellow card.
Oh my God.
To make the drill instructors back off.
Listen, folks, if you're listening to this and you think that is somewhat a good idea, you are setting your police up for failure. And here's why. Because the academy is the safest environment they're going to have the rest of their career. Because as soon as they get out there and have to deal with the real boys and girls in the crowd that actually do mean to do them harm, if they can't handle it in the safest environment, in the safest time of their career, they're not going to be able to handle it when they get out to the field. So you were doing them no favors. They need the stress inoculation.
Wait, you mean the yellow card doesn't work on the crook?
Right? Sir, I'm going to need you to hold on.
Yeah, hold up just a minute here. You are offending me.
I feel a little stressed out.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, that's where we are, right? As a society, we're safe. We feel safe.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that there is a predator class, right? Yes, there are people that are socially disadvantaged. There are people that have drug problems. There are people that have come onto hard times, like all of that. There is also a hardened predator class of people who make a living victimizing people. And those people are willing to shoot cops. They're willing to fight. They're willing to do difficult things. And that's where we have to have built the stress inoculation. We have to have built the resolve. We have to have built the fighting skills, the shooting skills to deal with that. And yeah, it's rare,
Yeah.
right?
And
Events like Uvalde are rare,
yep.
but I don't think anybody, including the guys who responded to Uvalde, feel good about what happened in Uvalde,
No. And
right? Like,
they did almost everything right. They got the hell in there. They didn't
yep,
hesitate. But goes part two of training. How many officers have ever actually felt what it's like to have an AK, a 223 shot near you inside of a very narrow space? That shockwave alone will jar you if you've never faced it. Now you can go out in the field and shoot an AR all day long. It is not the same as having something with that high velocity shot at you. It could be a pistol indoors towards your direction. Now I'm not saying that police departments need to start shooting rounds at the cops so they can get that stress inoculation, but it is jarring. One of the things that our academy does is our SWAT guys, they have a 357 that they will shoot these big ass blanks, and you'll be set up in a building and you're clearing and stuff, and if you don't clear correctly, they shoot it behind you.
oh boy.
And that concussion, I mean, I jump thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then you got to win your mind over to go into a room behind a closed door with a guy that's shooting that thing at you. That is a wake-up call. And I think part of that has to do with Uvalde, is they're hearing these rounds, and there is a mechanism in the body that you have to train to fight over what your brain's telling you. Your brain's telling you, get the fuck out of there, because you physically feel the concussion from these rounds. Even though they're not hitting you, you feel it. And the body is telling you, do not go in there, even though you know you need to. So
aggression is a trained response.
Absolutely.
Right? Like the majority of people default to flight, not fight. And so, we to have effective law enforcement in those situations, we have to have subjected you in training to enough situations that, one, we know that fight is in your menu, because there are people that fight is not in their menu.
Yeah.
Right. You see it in any of these major incidents. You see people where, the cops are hiding. Right. I mean, they get scared and they hide.
Yeah.
And they're not responding. And that's not a knock on them. That's a failure of training. That is a failure of us to down select to the kinds of people that we need who can respond to stress inoculation. I look at what the top tier teams in the United States are subjecting people to. I was recently with one of the top teams in the US, and they were talking about their selection process. Part of their selection process was to have you run hard hill intervals, come into a very brightly lit room, and then go into a tunnel that was pitch black where you could see nothing. And you had to move from one end of the tunnel to the other, and there were turns involved.
Okay.
And while you were in there, they started flooding the tunnel.
Oh shit. I'm done.
Now,
done. That's the biggest fear of mine, is fucking drowning.
Yeah. And so now, what you don't realize when that's happening is there's 5 guys with night vision down there watching you, and the water's only going to come up to your mid knee, but you don't know that.
Right.
Now you go, oh my God, that's ridiculous. That's unfair. When you look at what this unit does, that's a very real mission scenario for them.
Yeah.
Right. You look at any of our hostage rescue teams, any of our tier 1 units, like the kinds of circumstances those guys are subjected to. So they take selection very seriously, and they do psychological profiling, they do stress, they do all these things. We're not doing enough of that with law enforcement. And that doesn't mean that, everybody is cut out to be on a SWAT team, right? That's okay. Yeah. But let's diagnose that before.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not diagnose that in the middle of the problem. And let's, because it's bad for society, and it's bad for the officer, right? Like, I don't know how many suicides will follow Uvalde, but some will.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know how many people that responded to Uvalde will be permanently psychologically damaged and have drinking problems and get divorced. And like, people don't understand the fallout that occurs with an event like that. And so we're doing a disservice to both sides of the equation. We're not serving society, and we're not serving the officers. And honestly, it's not fair to not subject people to stress. And you do it, it's an inoculation, right?
Yeah.
It's small dose, bigger dose, bigger dose, bigger dose.
Yep.
I recently interviewed a guy named Earl Plumley. Earl is a Medal of Honor recipient, Green Beret type.
What?
Oh yeah.
Respect.
And so Earl is the most docile, easygoing guy you'll ever meet.
They always are.
Oh yeah, and he describes, like, you have to listen to the interview. It's like, oh yeah, no, I felt something hit me in the chest, and I looked down, and it was a grenade, and it wasn't mine, and it didn't have a pin in it, so I didn't want it, so I kicked it out of my way. Like, that's Earl.
Get this thing out of here.
Yeah. I mean, it's like his skill set is ridiculous. But Earl was in one of the worst. It was an attack on a Polish forward operating base. They set off a 5,000-pound explosive. 12 guys come in Afghan National Police uniforms, start shooting up the base. And Earl and a couple other guys end up responding. And Earl ends up going through multiple guns, running out of bullets. At one point, is out of gun, has no bullets for anything he's carrying.
Find a dead guy.
He sees an AK-47 on the ground, picks it up, realizes it's damaged, starts taking it apart, picks up another AK-47, takes the parts he needs from the second AK-47, puts them into the first gun, and turns around and kills the guy that's chasing him with it.
So hold on. For people listening, when shit hits the fan, the first thing to go is these fine motor skills. And the fact that he was able to pick up another AR or AK and put it together in itself is amazing, because I had been
while running from a guy trying to shoot him.
Yeah.
But the whole story's like that, right? And so I asked him, I'm like, what do you think underlies your performance? Because you have to read, take the time to go read the presidential citation for Earl Plumley, and just think about. I mean, if it was a movie, it would be, you wouldn't believe it happened. But I said, what created that? And he said, I was stress inoculated by the time I got there. We spent a great deal of time doing difficult things when we were exhausted and pushing each other. I mean, he literally taking his guys out on the range and saying, whoever shoots the worst today is getting tased.
That's a motivator.
Right? Or pepper spraying.
No, I will take shooting. A tasing all day over being pepper sprayed.
Yeah, well, he used both. Yeah, he used both. I'm exactly the opposite. I'll take the OC. I don't, electricity in my body are not friends.
I'd rather deal with 5 seconds than 45 minutes.
It felt like 10 years for me. Worst video ever is me screaming like a little girl when I got tased.
There's a little girl.
but he he goes through and he goes, we had drilled the fine motor skills so much. He goes, I remember them making us put together guns and yelling at us and going, this is going to happen to you when you're covered in honey and you're not going to know what to do and it's going to be dark. And he's like, damned if they weren't right.
Yeah.
And so, like, things like reloads, things like clearing a malfunction, all of that went away because he didn't have to think about it. And it allowed him to think about the bigger strategic picture of what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a guy who he literally ran into a crowd of 10 guys with AK-47s and suicide vests with a handgun. And one, by the way, he got blown up 3 times in the event.
Damn.
Multiple grenades bounced off of him and landed next to him. Like, it is the number of people that shot at him was insane. Like, I can't do the story justice.
Yeah.
You have to listen to it, but that is that stress inoculation. And he hit very hard in our interview that stress inoculation is everything. And we're not doing that with our law enforcement. We're not preparing you for the mission set that you may face. Partly because I think as a society, we don't want to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because it's unusual.
Yeah.
But if we're not going to prepare cops, then we can't vilify them.
Yep.
We can't look at them after the fact and go, oh, well, they didn't, they were unprepared and they didn't do that. I think that it's disingenuous for us to do that. And I think that we need to really look at the way we're preparing law enforcement. But for that to happen, law enforcement has to educate us.
Yes. Or when you realize there's a deficiency, This is one thing that I'll brag about a little bit. One of the things I prided myself on as an instructor was taking current training and seeing where the holes were
Yep.
and saying, oh, we could improve here. And when you offer those improvements, the only response should be from the higher ups is, yep, that makes sense. Let's do it. Now, I get it if they got a logistical or logical argument against something that you're trying to come up with, because, you know, you can throw ideas out all day long, but they need to make sense. But when it comes to this training, alert training, great training. I've been through it. Love it. And you know, there's some pain compliance behind it, because if you get shot with them little paint bullets, the shit hurts, right?
Yeah.
But the hole that I noticed, and this goes back to my academy training, was when the SWAT guys are firing off that big ass 357 or 44 mag, whatever the hell it was. I remember, I still to this day, I remember how much it jarred me. And that's what's missing from that type of training, in my opinion. Because when the shots are going out, you're almost working like a bat. You're you're going towards that echolocation, trying to find that stuff. And if I come in and all I hear is bleep, 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 like silenced weapons, that's kind of what those things sound like.
Yeah.
You really
But
do.
see, if you make it loud, then people get offended, and you know they won't go to the training, and they'll go home and complain about it. And
Right. But damn it,
like
stress inoculation, just like you said. I mean, another problem when you're talking about the fighting, you know, some academies don't allow them to fight anymore. There's police departments that won't let you use a closed fist, and the writing on the wall is that it just looks bad. Now, we train our guys, you can use a closed fist, but we discourage you from using a closed fist on a grounded subject. Why? Not because of how it looks, because more often than not, when we're in those situations, we miss. Or we're hitting a target that's connected to the ground. And sorry, physics are not in your favor. A lot of broken hands. It isn't so much that you're hurting the suspect, it's you're going to hurt yourself. So if you're going to give these excuses of why not to use a closed fist, at least make it make sense. No closed fist on a grounded subject. We're not saying you can't do it. We're just telling you we discourage it. And that's how our training is. We discourage it. Why? Because you guys keep breaking your hands and now you're out of work for 6-8 weeks. Let us teach you something different. You know, use the Stockton slap. You guys, that's the whole California move, right? Nate Diaz. So,
but see, you go back to what you said. A very, very small percentage of people have ever been in a fight.
Yeah.
And they don't, and especially one where they really thought they might be killed or get the living shit kicked out of them.
Yeah.
And so they look at it and they're like, oh, well, you know, you just, all you have to do is hit the guy one time, you know, just hit him once.
Yeah. The one hitter quitter.
Like, no, you win a fight by using considerably more force than the other guy did.
Yeah.
That's who wins the fight, is not, you know, it's the guy that uses more force. Yeah. I remember when I was in law school, I had a professor who was very anti-law enforcement.
Good for him.
She, hairy armpitted lesbian from Oregon who hated cops.
Don't say it shit when I'm taking a drink.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I actually got a spit take out of there. And she actually ended up being one of my favorite people, and I asked her to edit all of my articles because she had a very different perspective than I did. But she was talking about the Rodney King case, and she was like, I don't understand, you know, all these cops are black belts. I don't understand why they can't just take this guy into custody. And I raised my hand and said, Professor, like, did you say that you think all these cops are black belts? She said, yeah. I said, almost none of them are. They receive, you know, at most a few weeks of training on fighting. Like, but she sincerely believed that, you know, now it would be everybody's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And it's like, no, that's not how it works.
Nope.
And you don't get to punch the guy one time and have him quit.
Yeah.
If he's a motivated adversary, you literally may have to kill him. Yeah. And you see that all the time in law enforcement, both in fights. I mean, I remember I worked on a case where an officer got into a fight with a guy who was dusted. He's on PCP. And he literally beat that guy to a pulp and caved in his skull, and the guy was still fighting.
Damn.
And people don't understand that, like, human beings are really resilient. Yep. And if they're motivated, especially if they're
chemically
crazy, crazy,
motivated,
chemically suicidal, like, it's not going to be simple. Yep. And I think that we we need to spend more time talking about that. So then when it does happen and there's a little too much and I'm not saying George Floyd, because I have yet to meet anybody who's trying to defend George Floyd.
No, yeah,
I mean, there's
I
there's
am,
clearly a point, like the Rodney King video. There's clearly a point, like you got me. You got to. I'm
yeah,
willing to put a knee on a neck trying to subdue him.
yeah,
Clearly, there's a point where he is subdued. Then there's a point where he's unconscious. Then
yep,
there's a point where he's not breathing. Anywhere in there, feel free to take your knee off.
yeah. And
Um,
I'm. This is one of the things I recommend to anybody that looks at a use of force issue. First, watch the video muted. I
yeah,
don't want you to hear anything.
yeah,
The least you know about the situation, the better.
yeah,
Watch it muted. And I challenge other cops to do this. This is how I would review use of force that would come up the pipe, for my job as a use of force person. I would watch the video muted because I don't want to be biased on anything. I just want to see the actions. So that's how I'd watch it the first couple times through if I needed to, more times, but I'd watch it. And I watched the George Floyd thing and I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, I'm watching the way that this guy's shifting his weight. At first, even though his leg was over the neck, I'm like, all right, I see that he's got his body weight over his toe, not his knee. Like I'm seeing the shift, and then there comes a point where I see him looking over at the crowd, and the weight distribution shifts, and it doesn't go back. And I'm sitting
yeah,
there, and I'm like, all right, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, what the fuck? So then I listen to it, and my opinion is that was more about the crowd. He was trying to show them that they are not going to tell him how to do his job. And he was showing out a little bit for the rookies that were there and saying, this is how you handle this shit. And it fucked him, as it should have. So
yeah, as it should have. And
yeah,
that's the thing, is like in the end, one thing I concluded while I was in law school and working on con law cases is I'm a constitutionalist. Like,
yeah,
people forget that the Constitution doesn't die on the hill of the federal government. It dies at the local law enforcement level, right? It wasn't the SS that rounded up the Jews. It
right.
was the local police.
Yep.
So like we do need to look very carefully at our government anytime our government uses force. We need to look at it and say, was this reasonable? Was this fair? We also need to give the benefit of the doubt to the cop because he's in a difficult situation. We know, retrospectively that George Floyd wasn't going to fight anymore. You don't know that when it's happening.
Right.
So there does have to be a certain presumption of kind of innocence on the part of the cop. But the challenge for law enforcement is we've kind of gone away from subsequent remedial measures, right? We've kind of gone away from, I remember when I started my career, you'd go to a debrief and the debrief would be this very candid, open, here's what we screwed up.
Yeah.
That's changed.
Yeah. We call them TAC debriefs.
Yes.
I mean,
and that has changed now.
yeah.
I
My
went
unit still does those. It's a religious thing. I mean,
but see, that's a cultural thing. And we because we're going back and murdering everything a cop does after the fact, we're putting the agency in a position where we go, oh, George Floyd happened. Okay, that entire department is bad. All those cops are criminals. They're all racists. And so we put the department in a position where it has to defend itself. Recently there was a no-knock dynamic entry in Houston that went very sideways. And to the credit of the chief, he came out and said, yeah, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing that much. When Breonna Taylor happened, we didn't see the department come out and defend their actions. And what was unfortunate about that was that a false narrative became the story.
Can you give a little background on the Breonna Taylor
yeah,
story?
absolutely. So I had heard it kind of like you did, like everybody did on the news, and it was reported as cops serve a warrant at the wrong house, and they shoot an unarmed black woman in her bed.
Yeah, they were there for the boyfriend. The way that I heard it was the cops are at the door and a bullet comes through at them through the door, and so they fired back through the door. That's what I was. That's how I remember hearing it.
Yeah, it kind of broke down into a couple of narratives. It broke down into like they were at the wrong house, they shot her in her bed, that the boyfriend fired a warning shot. So it's typical of the podcast. If something I think has value, I will dig into it. And I did. I read every report. I looked at every video, every picture. I talked to several people involved in the incident. And ultimately, I interviewed John Mattingly, who was the sergeant that led the operation. It is a complicated situation. There is a lot going on, but the basic facts are that the police department is serving multiple warrants looking for a guy named Jamarcus Glover, who is a drug dealer. And one of Jamarcus Glover's known associates is Breonna Taylor. It's his ex-girlfriend. They've known each other for a long time. She has bailed him out of jail a couple of times. She has rented a car for him that was subsequently discovered with a body in it, which she said was stolen. He has been caught on jail audio saying that she's holding his money for him. Her address is the address he's using for his cell phone and all of those things. So that's why she is a target of the investigation. The department decides to go get Jamarcus Glover. They're broken up. She has a new boyfriend named Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is living with her at her apartment. Police don't know this. They have a no-knock warrant for all of the sites. And the reason that they did a no-knock warrant was so that they would have the ability, if Jamarcus Glover was there, they would have the ability to go in no-knock. They made a decision before they get to the location, when they do the briefing, that it's going to be a knock and notice warrant. They bang on the door for somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute. The consensus seems to be around 45 seconds. Initially just banging on the door, eventually announcing themselves, police department search warrant. There is at least one neighbor who comes out from upstairs, who's a guy picking up his daughter. He comes out onto the porch and starts having an argument with the police. When he does, he eventually goes back into his apartment. So obviously the knock and notice is working on somebody. Breonna Taylor is asleep in bed. Kenneth Walker is in bed next to her. He hears it, gets out of bed. He has a legal firearm. He is lawfully authorized to carry a firearm, has that firearm. She wakes up, gets dressed. He gets out of bed. The two of them are standing in a hallway at the inn. So when the team, if you picture the apartment, the front door opens, then it goes down into a hallway, and there's two bedrooms at the end on the right-hand side. So there's a long straight hallway that comes out the front door. When the police department breaches the front door, Kenneth Walker fires one round, which has been described as the warning shot. The warning shot strikes Jon Mattingly, the sergeant who is leading the effort, in the thigh and hits his femoral artery. So if it is a warning shot, it is one hell of a warning. He returns fire. Another officer next to him, Miles Cosgrove, detective next to him, returns fire. Mattingly fires, I think it's 4 rounds and then 2 rounds. Cosgrove, I think, fires 16 at that point. Kenneth Walker dives back into the bedroom. So he fires 1 round and then dives back into the bedroom. Unfortunately, Breonna Taylor was on the other side of the hallway. So she is probably trying to move back into the bedroom as they return fire. They hit her either 5 or 6 times. There's been some kind of conflict in what's been released.
Okay.
And she dies there. Eventually, they pull Mattingly back, put a tourniquet on him. I would encourage everybody to look up the video of Mattingly bleeding in the driveway and the medical response that he got, because that's a good training argument for why you need TCCC. But when that happens, another officer named Brett Hankison moves away from the front door and begins dumping rounds into 3 rooms down the side of the apartment. Now, by most accounts I've heard in looking at pictures and video, those windows are covered. He believes that they are in a firefight and is trying to provide supportive fire, but those rounds are not shot specifically at people. What he was seeing for muzzle flash were probably his own guys. It had to be his own guys. Kenneth Walker fired 1 round.
Okay.
And so he's in a gunfight. Well, he thinks he's in a gunfight and he's not. And the rounds that he fires go into an adjoining apartment. Thankfully, don't hit anybody. And so that's, as I started to dig into it, it's racist cops, no knock warrant, wrong house, killed in her bed. And in fact, I didn't find any of that when I investigated and talked to people. And don't get me wrong, this is a tragedy. She should not be dead. And there's certainly arguments to be had about no knock warrant. I mean, they knocked and noticed, but there's questions about dynamic tactics. I think there's a lot of things to discuss. There, based on federal charges that have been filed, there were officers that lied to get the warrant beforehand. The federal government, the state charged Brett Hankison with wanton reckless endangerment. He was acquitted at a state trial. The feds have now charged him federally, which I think there's at least a very colorable argument that that's reasonable. Whether that's a question of, that he was inadequately trained, I think is a separate conversation that needs to be had.
Okay.
But as that narrative starts to run, you have LeBron James, Alicia Keys, Beyonce, Oprah, the mayor of Louisville, all spouting how the police department killed an unarmed woman and they killed somebody in her bed. And Kamala Harris, at that point, is a vice presidential candidate. She says on national television that they served the warrant at the wrong house. So, I mean, there's a huge false narrative that runs while this is all evolving. And unfortunately for Louisville PD, this happens 2 months before George Floyd. So you had Ahmaud Arbery happen, then Breonna Taylor, and then Benjamin Crump picks up the Ahmaud Arbery case, and then George Floyd happens, and Benjamin Crump picks up the Breonna Taylor case, and it goes viral. And so the two are conflated so that we look at it and we go, well, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd are the same thing. And obviously they're not.
Yeah. But
that's the narrative. And, by the time you're done, these officers are moving their families 5 or 6 times because they have credible death threats. The department, to some degree, washes their hands of the whole thing. And the new chief of police comes in and says that, what happened was wrong. The mayor says that. Ironically, the only guy that really kind of sided with the officers was the attorney general.
Really?
Yeah, who refused to charge them despite intense political pressure. Refused to charge them because, again, split it into incidents. The warrant being supported by a false affidavit is illegal and unconstitutional and needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
The officers executing the warrant have nothing to do with the obtaining of the warrant. They're serving a lawful warrant signed by a judge
on good
in
faith.
reliance, in good faith.
Yep.
They breach, they knock and notice, they breach the door and are shot. Right. So they're returning fire.
Yeah.
So their actions are constitutional. I wrote an article a while back about a case in LA, and it's like, just because a tragedy occurs doesn't mean an injustice does.
Yeah, right.
And so I think this is one of those cases where you really have to dissect it, and we need to look at it piece by piece. And the problem is it got so politicized that the real questions that should be asked don't end up being asked. And law enforcement has to take such an aggressive defensive posture that nobody stops to go, wait a minute, should this have been a dynamic warrant? Could we have knocked and noticed or called her and said, hey, we have your house surrounded. We're here to execute a warrant. You need to come out, which is the way most major cities would handle it.
Yeah. And then it goes into experience. So one of the tactics I like to use is I'll call our person of interest and say, hey, it's Detective such and such. We need to talk to you about something. We're headed to your place. We're about 20 minutes out, even though we're already there and we're already set up. And then inevitably they walk out the door. They're going to get in their car to get the hell out of there. And you've taken them out of that tactical advantage. They're not inside their house, and you've caught them in that intermediary area, and it's a more controlled environment. Or you even wait for their car to take off, and then you go and you knock them down once they stop, or you do a traffic stop, but you got them out of that environment. So that goes into when we talk about tactics and experience levels and stuff like that. I'm not going to say that these guys aren't experienced, but there are different ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And when you do these type of warrants, that's stuff you have to consider. So,
Well, but I think that for us to look at these things, we need to look at the subtleties here, and we need to have these conversations and dissect them. And I think that that's what's getting lost, which is part of the reason that I wanted to address it on the podcast and actually have a conversation
yeah,
with Jon Mattingly and do my own homework. And the funny thing about it is, Jon Mattingly openly admits it's a tragedy. It's terrible.
yeah, yeah.
He did not have control once Kenneth Walker shot him in the leg.
No, you're absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody is a passenger on the bus once that starts.
Yeah, and we have, I don't want to call it a saying necessarily, but most of the time our actions are predicated on the bad guy. Like we didn't set out to go shoot a gun at him. I didn't set out to do any of that. If they would have just turned around, put their hands behind their back, and let me put cuffs on him, well, that's the response. But the moment you shoot at me or anybody else around me, like now you forced my hand. I have to do something a little more extreme.
Yeah, the suspect gets a vote, and unfortunately, it's sometimes the decisive vote.
Right, and her death is on his hands because he's the reason those officers fired.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's true, and I completely agree with that. And constitutionally, I agree with that. I think the bigger question we need to have is: was there a better way to do this?
Right, and that's
let's not go on a witch hunt. Let's look at it and go: was there a better way that this warrant could have been executed?
Yeah,
and were we? I mean, at that point, Louisville SWAT was already using contain and call out, and in fact does on the warrant for Jamarcus Glover. But the narcotics guys had not been trained. And there are 7 guys on the raid who work in 6 different units who have never served a warrant together and are not trained. Now, Mattingly's very trained. I mean, Jon's got 2,000 warrants by then. He's been a narc for a long time. He's got no use of force complaints. He's taken no discipline for force. Never shot anybody. The supreme irony is everybody says he's a racist, and I mean his daughter is literally married to a black guy. He's got 2 black grandbabies that he adores. So if he's a racist, he's a terrible racist. But it's like we just want to just paint this as, oh, it's just this thing, and it's like, no, it's not just this thing.
Yeah,
we need to look at these situations and go, what other options were available, and we do need to punish people that do things that are wrong. Right, like Derek Chauvin needed to go to jail.
Yeah.
George Floyd was wrong.
Yep.
But we can't just conflate these things into the same situations. We need to take the time to really take them apart and look at what we can learn from them. And we need to get back to a culture of lessons learned and not blame fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a recent example that I would have. Like I said, there's 100 ways to skin a cat, right? Some of the stuff you need to look at, and I'm talking to other cops out there, is like, is it pressing? Like, is it imminent that you have to make this arrest right now? I get that for no knock stuff. Like, there's a bunch of evidence that lives are on the line, and you gotta get in there. Obviously, you're gonna lean on the teams that are trained in that. You should not have a Bad News Bears hodgepodge of cops that have never worked together go serve a warrant like that. If time is, go ahead.
It's interesting though, like so the National Tactical Officers Association, I just interviewed the executive director and training director for the NTOA. And the NTOA issued a position paper opposing no-knock warrants last year. And the argument was, and I think it's a good argument, that there is a priority of safety. There's the safety priorities or priorities of life. Originally it was priorities of life, and then that was a little too offensive, so now we call it safety priorities. That an innocent is obviously the life of an innocent is more valuable, and we're willing to trade the life of an officer for the life of an innocent, hence hostage rescues and all of those kinds of things. And that the life of the suspect is less valuable than the life of the officer. And below that is evidence. And so the NTOA's argument is you never trade something higher for something lower. Like, we never give up a hostage to protect an officer when we could have saved the hostage.
Right.
And their argument is, and like I said, I think it has merit to at least discuss. You never trade somebody's life, whether it's a suspect, a hostage, and an officer. You never trade a life for evidence. And I interviewed Phil Hansen, who was one of the original SEB guys and a board member for NTOA. And Phil said when we started, and Phil was around when Special Tactics started, we were using hostage rescue tactics for everything that we did, because that was what we knew how to do.
That's all they knew.
And so when the war on drugs happened, that's what we did.
Yeah.
He said, but at some point we realized it wasn't worth trading a cop's life for a bag of dope.
Right.
So that's kind of the question that as a society, we need to do that math and within police departments. And I'm not saying that you would never use dynamic tactics for evidence, nor am I willing to trade your life or anybody else who pins on a badge every day to make a dope case.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Societally, I don't want to make that trade. Hell, we're legalizing drugs in most places.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want to make that trade. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the discussion that needs to happen. It isn't about reforming law enforcement. It's about looking at, as a society, what do we care about and what are we willing to trade? Are we willing to trade a police officer's life to build a case? And originally, I think the answer everybody had was yeah. But I've been to enough places where 25-year-old girls have received folded flags.
Yeah.
To know that that's a really shitty case.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever want to make that trade.
Yep. I agree. There's I hate going around. I don't like using always and never. So for me, a no knock is almost never necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the NTOA intentionally took on that position because, their argument was that if it's a hostage situation, it's exigent circumstances anyways. And so you don't need a no knock.
Correct.
But I think that they intentionally took a provocative stance because there needed to be in their mind, needed to be a provocative stance taken. And I think that, we just need to start looking at some of these things and really taking them apart and making choices, not allowing situations to evolve where, like in Houston, we have 2 homeowners dead and 4 police officers injured on what was purportedly a heroin dealing case.
Oh, okay.
And is now maybe not even that because they didn't find any heroin and it looks like maybe the informant wasn't real. Right.
Yeah.
Like we have to ask those questions.
Yeah.
But we need to do it in a way that is constructive, not stand around pointing fingers at each other and yelling at each other constantly.
Yeah. You should find the learning points on everything. That's one of the things I like doing on this is, trying to get some sort of education portion out of it and then having discussions that people can get behind, us discussing this. People they're going to learn a lot, I think, just from what we've discussed and considering different ways, one, to serve warrants and prioritize things and things to consider when they bring up an argument like cops shouldn't be serving warrants and doing all that stuff. Well, now you've heard some arguments why they should be done and why they shouldn't be done and how they should be done. And I can tell you right now, I've never gone to school where they're like, here's all the types of warrants and different ways that you can serve a warrant safely or things to consider. Like,
it's the whole Maslow thing, right? Like if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to view all your problems as nails.
Right.
Well, the corollary to that is cops don't have a choice. They have to take action. So if the only tool you have is a hammer, all your problems are nails, even if they're screw shaped or whatever, right? And so if we want law enforcement to make better tactical decisions, we need to give them money and give them opportunities to train so that they have a bigger toolbox that allows them to make multiple choices. Because the thing people forget is cops can't just leave.
Yeah.
Right? In most of these situations, once you arrive, you're there.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're liable for life, safety, all that stuff. That's why it bugs me. A lot of people are like, well, you didn't have to arrest that drunk guy. I'm like, what am I going to do with him? I can't let him go.
Yeah.
Because if he goes off and kills somebody, well, now I'm liable. Like, sorry, my family comes first on that type of thing. So there's a sense of liability and stuff like that. And, it can be argued, when you think of car chases, they're like, well, they just let that guy go. I'm like, well, if I chase him and he smashes into a family of 4 in a car and kills him, is that my fault? Partially?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the safety priorities, we're trading an innocent for a crook. We're trading down.
Right.
Yeah. And but I think it also goes back to kind of how we are taking and sharing information. You said earlier, right at the beginning of this conversation, that part of the reason you did this podcast was because law enforcement wasn't taking advantage of social media. Law enforcement was not using the medium available to them to share information. And I think that we, across the board, in part because cops can't talk to the media, but in part because we're not consciously trying, we're not capturing the true lessons learned. I mean, the origin story for my podcast was that one of our friends, who was a Marine 06, Sergeant LAPD, amazing guy, named Tim Anderson. Tim was an integrative tactical thinker. He fused law enforcement doctrine with military doctrine. And when Tim got ALS and slowly died, and we were standing at Tim's funeral, and we said, I said, how much did we lose today? How many lessons learned? How much information? Tim never wrote a book. We don't have him on video. We don't have him on audio. Everything in that man's head just disappeared. And we're going to learn those lessons again the same hard way that he did. And it led to a discussion about all of these great leaders who, the really good ones never appear anywhere, right? The guys that are humble servants and like they may teach law enforcement, we don't capture them. We don't get video, we don't get audio. And so it led to a discussion about how we could do this. And one of my mentors, a guy named Sid Hale, who unfortunately died shortly after he did the podcast with me, said, if you want to do this, you're going to have to do it yourself, because we're not going to talk to the media. It's not safe. We have to know whoever we talk to, we can trust. And so the idea behind the podcast was, let's get these guys on audio or video. Let's capture their lessons learned. Let's capture their stories. Let's capture their wisdom, but let's do it in a way that is not destructive. Let's make sure that they listen to it and are okay with everything that's said. And because it's my footage, if they say something that could be used against them, it goes away. We make good choices about what information gets in the public space. Obviously, we don't discuss specific tactics. We don't discuss a lot of that.
Yeah.
But leadership and the lessons learned from these events, I get emails and calls and all kinds of stuff from all over the country, from people all over the world, people I've never met or spoken to, and none of these guys have ever met. I'll get an email that says, hey, this episode changed the way our team trains.
Yeah. That's why I pre-record almost everything. Because one, I want the level of conversation to be comfortable, and you're not walking on eggshells when you got to, like you said, cops, we have to be mindful of what we say. We can be shit canned from our department for, what we say. Freedom of speech is great and all, but there are consequences to freedom of speech. And unfortunately for police officers, why not many of them do anything even remotely like what I do on here.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately for me, I have a badass chief. He backs what I do. He knows and trusts, and told me that he trusts that I'm not going to say anything dumb. But even though I still protect myself, I don't mention our department, and I also pre-record. So I, just in case my dumbass says something stupid, I can take
or even
that.
something ambiguous. I mean, that's a lot of times, do you still beat your wife?
Yeah.
No. Oh, okay. Well, when did you stop?
Yeah.
Right. Like it's sometimes you can say things that are ambiguous or can be interpreted negatively.
Yeah.
And you by pre-recording, you create an environment where you can go back and listen to it. And what I do with every episode is I've got a handful of guys that are not, I send it to the guest signs off on it. They go, yep, good to go. And I got a handful of guys that I send it to, and I go, murder this thing. Murder this episode.
Yeah.
Tell me where he said something that could be used against him. He says something you're concerned about. And it's everybody from a chief down to a sergeant.
Yeah.
That I turn to, and I'm like, I need you to tell me that this episode is not going to be negatively construed, because we are taking on, we're taking on Breonna Taylor. Like, how much more controversial can you be? Right. My marketing people literally pulled me aside and had a conversation with me about it. Like, do you realize the reputational risk involved in this?
Right. Right. But if
You
you
know, it's like,
stick
yeah,
to
but I don't
education and
care.
facts,
Yeah.
you're not going to go wrong.
No, and in the end, what happened happened. And the question is, what are the lessons learned?
Yeah.
And so many of these guys have so much to share. You know, going back to the guys that have been in trouble, none of the guys that brought me up would have kept their jobs for 3 years now. Like the people we look back at
Yeah.
and we go, oh man, that guy was a hero. That guy was a legend. Those guys would have all been fired in modern law enforcement.
Yeah.
We would have never allowed them to get to the level of wisdom that they got.
Yeah. Right.
Right. It's like, if, you know, none of the founding fathers would get elected now.
Oh God, no.
Right. They would all be pushed out.
Yeah.
And so if you just stop and think about that from a societal standpoint, you go, yeah, people do bad things, but people also do really good things. And sometimes, you know, people who have, you know, personal morality problems, you know, do amazing things. And the founding fathers are a perfect example of people who punched way above their weight.
Right. At their age.
Right. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
they were old men, and they, you know, then they all had strong religious beliefs, and they all had strong views, and they created a country that was way better than any of them were capable of living at that point. And I think in law enforcement, it's very easy to go, well, that guy's stupid because he did this. And it's like, yeah, but in the process of marginalizing him,
Yeah.
you are not learning what he can teach you.
Yep. Well, we're in the damn TikTok generation. If it's longer than fucking 30 seconds of attention span,
12.
12, whatever it is, we're out. Like, and you would not believe how many cops were like, dude, I love the idea of the podcast, love what you're doing, but you need to shorten it. You need to shorten it.
12 seconds.
I'm like, I'm not, it's either good content or it's not. I don't care the length. If you're focused, the best podcast in the world, Joe Rogan's podcast, 3 hours long.
Well, wow. Sean Ryan, I mean, to go more on point with our industry.
Yeah.
Sean Ryan, I think this week was like number 5 or 6 in the world in podcasts. And that is a 3.5 to 6 hour deep dive into, you know, military tactics and other stuff. And the fact that his podcast is that highly ranked gives me hope that maybe we are starting to pay attention.
Yeah. So just in that fact, it's crazy. I want to kind of touch on something you said. You have your people, you know, go over your stuff. I don't have people, but just my experience, I want people to know, like, John's people were on my ass. Like, hey, we need this link. We got to be able to give it to John. We got to do this thing. And I'm like, look, I'm a cop. This isn't my main source of anything. I was like, I'll send it to him tomorrow, hour before. I was like, that's what I do. And they're like, you can't get it in here. I'm like, no.
I recognize my own my shortcoming is I am not a detail person.
Yeah. And
I am not a, like, you know, I do not make a to-do list every day.
Yeah.
And as a result, I surround myself with people that do, to make up for my weaknesses.
Yep.
Well, and fortunately, I've been very lucky.
Keep touching on it. I wanna make sure for the people that just listen to this podcast. Currently, I have John's podcast page up on the video portion. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, I've got his thing up here. It's the Debrief with Jon Becker. If you want to find the website, it's thedebrief.live. So TheDebrief.live if you want to find it. So and go ahead and check it out on our YouTube channel. You'll see I'm scrolling through. We're looking through it all. Kind of walk us through here, John. What's the page all about?
So I mean, the purpose of the show is to take lessons learned from law enforcement and military and bring them forward with an eye on improving operator safety. Now, obviously, a lot of our modern failures arise from leadership. So leadership is a focal point for the show. We're 18 or 19 episodes in, 2 seasons. We've been very fortunate. The show's been very well received. We've actually made it into the top 20. Now, made it as high as number 16 in the Apple podcast charts for government. The last I checked, we were, I think, number 54 globally for government podcasts. So, I mean, the show has done much better than I would have ever imagined it would do.
I don't even know how to check for that.
I can tell you afterwards.
Okay.
But it's you know, the goal of the show is to improve officer safety. And you do that by bringing on better leaders, by talking about, debriefing tactical events. One of the recent episodes was a debrief of the Bataclan hostage rescue in Paris, and I had the team leader, or one of the team leaders from the team, that was on that operation, walk through the event and talk about decisions that they made and why they made them and what happened, and the fallout. Mental health is a big focus right now for law enforcement and military. Like, we are killing our tactical operators and our cops in the way we're treating them, and the lack of support we're giving them. And so all of those are things that we're picking up and looking at. We're looking at training and technology, and just trying to, I realized now, almost 40 years into doing this, dealing with thousands of agencies all over the world and having access to a lot of people, I had access to a lot of really important thought leaders that would never appear in the media. Like, we would never. I interviewed Lee McMillian, who's the head of LAPD SWAT, one of two lieutenants that run LAPD SWAT, and a stone cold tactical legend, deep thinker, amazing guy. There's no interviews of Lee anywhere. One of my favorite people in the world, one of the best tactical leaders I've ever seen. But he's not somebody that's out teaching. He's not writing, didn't write a book. We're not going to learn from him. And so that's a lot of my goal is let's go take on difficult issues. Let's go look at critical incidents and debrief them. And, it grew in part out of our lecture series. We do an evening lecture series at Aardvark that when there's a big event, we will hold a private event at Aardvark and invite in the team that was affected by that big event to sit down with, 200 tactical operators from 75 to 100 different agencies, and actually spend time going through the events and talking about lessons learned in an environment where there's no cameras, there's no media, and we can actually pass those lessons along. So it's that is part of my personal mission, is to pay back the debt of the guys that trained me and brought me up by sharing this information with others.
Yeah. So I've got Aardvark pulled up as well. I'm a big this is why I think I do get repeat customers as far as my podcast guests go, because I like to promote stuff that I believe in. I don't do a lot of homework on my people, but as soon as I saw, this is what I knew about you before. I didn't know much about the podcast side, but I did know about the Aardvark, and right away I was like, oh, not only is he putting gear out, he's putting training out. And I, obviously, as a former instructor, I'm big into training. Just like, I love that you said any free training you would take advantage of. And I'm kind of the same way. As long as I got the time, I will knock out some training. Good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. Because we've been through some shit training before. It's a good.
But you learn. The thing is, you learn. It's even the stupidest person you talk to makes you smarter.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. But the website is aardvarktactical.com. AAR. Is that how Aardvark is spelled normally?
Yeah, 2 A's. It's actually an Afrikaans, or it's a Dutch word.
Oh.
So 2 A's.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I totally would have spelled that wrong. I'm glad I said it
here. Yeah. I'm a John without an H in his name, and my business is named Aardvark. I'm used to people misspelling my stuff.
You need to slap your people when they send text. Oh, John's doing this, and they spelled it with an H.
Yep. Nope. Send me a list of people.
I got their names. I'm going to say.
Send me names.
They're like, we are not letting you do shit with Levine again.
There will be meetings.
Yeah. But no, I'm actually very excited to check out your podcast. For one, I keep my podcast streams limited. I like Joe Rogan. For my comedy side, I like Two Bears, One Cave. They kind of inspired the name.
It's Two Cops, One Downer.
Yeah, and people are always like, why is it two cops? There's only just you. Well, listen, I'm still in the military, so I'm still a cop for the military, and I'm a city cop. So I am the two cops in one donut. And so that kind of makes sense to me. And I don't give a shit if it makes sense to anybody else. Listen, the name's catchy, it's funny, and that's my sense of humor. So I don't defend it. I like people to come up with their own things. Oh, that's like Two Girls, One Cup. Well, that wasn't my intent.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah, that wasn't my intent, but it's funny, and I'm Shit, I'll leave it. I don't give a crap.
Like my business is named after an obscure South African earth pig. I'm
Earth
not in
pig,
a position.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what aardvark means.
Does it really?
Yeah, aardvark means earth pig.
Oh.
Yeah, I am not in a position to criticize the names of other people's businesses.
An aardvark is a lot like a armadillo, right?
No, actually nothing like it.
No.
That's what everybody thinks. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so aardvarks are big. Aardvarks are
they got a big long nose, right?
Yeah, so they're a family member
I'm gonna look it up.
of the anteater, but think like large German Shepherd size, but heavier.
Okay.
And
yeah,
South
yeah.
African animal, big mammal. The reason it was aardvark is I had people suggest names when I started the business, and I didn't want something that was like right on the nose with what we did. And so people suggested all kinds of stuff, and as the business grew and began to do more military stuff, people are, oh, you should call it, Falcon, Attack Tiger. It's everything in our industry is friggin' the whole damn industry
Tiger
is like
King.
it's like raptor birds and large cats and like that. That's kind of the industry. And a couple of weeks later, when I was going to pick the name of the business, Aardvark stuck with me.
Okay.
Right, because it was weird. And it has become a point of pride for the business because we are weird. We're not a traditional distributor.
Yeah.
We do a lot of military integration. We're not a traditional business because I was brought up by SWAT cops. So we're more focused on our end user and end user safety than we are on making money.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't be successful, but like our mission is, we have one specific mission, and everybody that starts at Aardvark, I give them, the talk is, you have one thing to do: protect the operator, and everything else will follow. But if you just focus on the end user, if you focus on the operator, so we're a kind of non-traditional business in the way we look at things, and so the name kind of fits. And what I realize now, looking back, is we're the only aardvark in our industry.
Yeah, you are.
and once you learn the name,
yeah,
you're never going to go, was it Eagle, Falcon, Hawk? What was the name? Like, you're never going to do that with Aardvark.
Yeah, you know exactly what animal it was.
Yeah.
So I want to. I think we're coming to a natural wind down, but there's one question in particular that's nagging me. You have surrounded yourself with some of the coolest shit some would consider in the world. There's how many millions of people playing Call of Duty. People have an interest in this stuff, right? And you are more involved without being one. How the hell did you avoid the itch?
It just was never there.
Really?
It just was never there. Like I love what my clients do. Like, I work with people who do amazing things. I always say, like, it's very easy for me to find motivation for my job because I deal with people who put themselves in harm's way, literally risk their lives for people that they have never even met, and in some cases never will meet.
Yeah.
And so I love my end user. I have never been interested in doing the job. And now retrospectively, like, as the business started to grow, I realized that, because I had teams that were like, hey, you should come on as a reserve. Hey, come do this, come be a technical reserve. And it's my answer has always been no.
But hell no.
No, yeah. And the thing is, it's not because I don't respect the job, because I 100% respect the job and love cops and am grateful every day that I'm able to do what I'm able to do. It's just, it's never, I like guns. I own guns. I carry a gun.
Hell yeah.
I don't love guns. There's not guns all over my house. I don't.
You can't move to Texas then.
I don't airsoft. No, I could still pass the gun test in Texas, because
Okay.
I do have quite a few of them, and some of them have 2 positions on the selector switch. But I know, in California too.
What?
Licenses.
Right.
Well, I've got every license known to mankind.
I'm not at that level.
I've literally every federal
I can't
license
afford
you
that
have.
level.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have to. But it's I realize that I am more effective outside of the machine than I would ever be inside the machine. I have an ability to do things as non-sworn, non-military, to host events that would not be tied to an agency, to host a podcast that's not subject to anybody's control but my own. And I think that where I am, I can create a greater impact than I ever could inside of the machine. And so it's never been there. But like I said, man, I love my operators. Just about all of my friends are in some way, shape, or form, in this line of work or the military side or the federal side. And I am surrounded by amazing people every day. But it just was never
in the cards for you.
No.
Self-aware man. I like that. And I tell that to a lot of cops. I talk to some people, I'm going to do this and this is a very new thing I've seen come to light. Oh, I want to do this for a few years to build my resume up and go into something else. I'm like, that is ballsy. You can't be half in on this job.
Yeah, it's not a job for people that are half in. And unfortunately, if you are half in, your likelihood of surviving it goes down.
Right. You're really setting yourself up for failure. Whether it be, we won't even have to go extreme and say you're going to lose your life, but just being half in, like, you're setting yourself up for liability, for failure, for somebody else getting hurt. I mean, man, you really need to weigh and measure if you're going to do something like this, because like I said, I don't want a halfway cop.
I'll tell you, man, all the years I've done this, so 40 some odd years, I probably go to 25 or 30 debriefs a year.
Really?
Which is where the name came from. Yeah. I mean, because we deal with so many teams and I am a perpetual student of the game.
Yes.
Right? Like my job is not to be Tiger Woods. It's to coach Tiger Woods.
Yes.
And to make sure that he's hitting the best golf club he can possibly hit every day.
Now, are you finding with your podcast and stuff that you are learning so much more than you ever anticipated?
Yes.
That's the addiction. That's the addiction.
It's so good. It's just, one, it's taking me into conversations. It's taking me to a greater depth of conversation than I would normally have.
Yeah.
A lot of the guests that I've had on the show because I've had a conversation with them in passing where I'm like, that was really interesting. But when you have 90 minutes with somebody or 2 hours with somebody, you can dig so much deeper.
Yes.
But I will tell you, the one thing that I consistently see in every debrief I go to, anytime there's an event with one of our teams, I'll call somebody on the team and go, tell me what happened. The one thing I see is the guys that survive and thrive in events and after events are the ones that are prepared. The teams that are prepared, like, you look at the Bataclan raid, which is, I think, the worst tactical situation I've ever seen. 12 hostages or 15 hostages in a narrow hallway, like 4 feet wide, 30 feet long, 2 terrorists, AK-47s, explosive vests, barricaded door, and you're going to make entry. Good luck. Yep. Oh, by the way, before you make entry, the bomb squad just called and you can't shoot the guys in the torso because their vessel detonate and kill everybody. So you have to head shoot them all. Oh, by the way, we're staging a second team just in case you guys get killed.
It's a movie.
That is literally the thing. That team makes that entry, saves all those hostages, both hostage takers dead. Only one of their guys gets shot in the left hand. Ironically, the only left-handed guy. Murphy.
Fuck.
Their shield takes 27 rounds from an AK-47. And the guy blows himself up. And all the hostages survive. And the only reason that happened was because the team that executed that, BRI, was drilled beyond belief. They were a ridiculously capable team who took training very seriously, who took operations very seriously, had been in these kinds of situations. And I mean, I always say, like, the guy that I interviewed, who I really love, just a great guy, I said a lesser man would have certainly died. In Earl Plumley's case, a lesser man would have certainly died. So I don't think it is a place where you can go in half measures. I think you need to be committed. You need to learn. And you need to, prepare yourself for the situations you're going to get into, because your survival will literally depend on it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, sir, you got anything else? I think it's
fantastic.
That was a good fucking mark to end on right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, man, I appreciate what you do, and anything we can do to help you, I'm always here.
Awesome. All right, stick around. I'll end this, and we'll chit chat offline. Appreciate you, boss.
Thank you, buddy.